So with this Snare Saturday video, it is time to showcase another vintage drum, which I've already done, and all of them were Ludwig. And this one kind of is a Ludwig drum. However, this brand or partnership in particular was known for being innovators with drum hardware, and most people say that these drums feel well constructed. So in this video, I'm going to be taking the drum completely apart to detail it and bring it back to what it looked like from the factory to see if both the hardware and the sound of the drum stand the test of time. What is going on, everybody? Nick Costa here, and in this video I'm going to be showing you a Leedy and Ludwig 4.5 by 14 new era snare drum. This was a drum that was made by Leedy and Ludwig in the 1950s, which means that this drum is over 60 years old. Now before we dive into this video, make sure you hit the subscribe button as well as the bell notification. That way you're notified of any additional content that I upload to the channel. So a little bit of a backstory with the Leedy and Ludwig new era snare drum. This was a drum that was introduced in the 1950s, and the Leedy and Ludwig brand were known for being innovators of hardware. Now, one thing in particular, I am a huge fan of their lug design. It has this Art Deco style, what they call a beaver tail lug, and you can see from this lug how it has influenced lugs from other brands. To me, it looks like it stands the test of time. It looks like something that would be on a present day drum, but these were being made in the 1950s. So with the new era snare drum, it is a 4.5 deep by 14-inch mahogany shell. And because the shell is so shallow, the lugs are in line with one another rather than being on top of one another. So when I first got my hands on this drum, I was pretty excited because new era drums go for a pretty penny and they're known for being really well built. And once I started diving into the drum, I started to realize that this definitely is a player's grade drum. And what I mean by that is that it is not 100% original. The hoops that came on the new era snare drums from the factory were stick chopper or stick saver hoops, however you want to identify them. And the ones that are on this drum look like triple flange hoops from that era, and you can tell they're from that era because they are nickel plated. Additionally, on the throw off, for some reason they decided to drill extra holes, whoever owned this drum before I did, I guess to make the throw off go a little bit lower than where it was from the factory. And you can also see that some of the tension rods that were nickel plated have been replaced with chrome tension rods. But that's okay, because for me, I want to clean restore this drum and kind of give it some more life because it is part of that Ludwig history. And I think it's a cool drum to have in my collection. Now the finish on this drum is white marine pearl wrap, which just like every other white marine pearl wrap drum from this era has aged to have a little bit more of a yellowish hue to it, which I think looks pretty cool. Also, this drum does not have any additional holes besides the throw off ones that I mentioned earlier. So this particular drum did not have an internal dampener installed from the factory. So let's go ahead and get this drum disassembled and start bringing it back to life. Now before we go any further in this video, I wanted to give you all a friendly reminder for the Ludwig 6.5 by 14 chrome over brass snare drum giveaway at shop.nickcostamusic.com. Simply purchase anything from shop.nickcostamusic.com to automatically be entered to win. Every dollar that you spend will get you 5 entries into winning this drum. So spend $10, get 50 entries. Go all out and spend $100 and get 500 entries. Not only are you going to win the drum, you're going to get brand new heads from Remo, additional snare wires, and a black Ludwig snare drum case to go along with everything. So if you've already purchased something, this is the perfect opportunity to get that final thing, to get those additional entries. And if you are somebody who likes to wait till the last minute, you at least are going to get 5 entries for every dollar that you spend to up your probability of winning. This is a very short giveaway, so your probability of winning is really high. Once again, head to shop.nickcostamusic.com, grab anything for yourself, and automatically be entered to win. Now, let's get back to the video. Okay, so I've already taken the drum apart because I was debating on whether cleaning it behind the scenes and just showing you a before and after, or taking you along the ride. And I've decided to include you all with the restoration cleaning process because some of this hardware is nickel plated, like say the tension rod here, or the hoops. And things that are nickel plated, if you've ever tried to clean or restore an older drum, then you know that the process is a little bit different than hardware that is chrome plated. Additionally, I wanted to see what I was getting myself into with this drum. Taking a look at the shell, it's in really decent shape. The wrap is that faded white marine pearl that is super common for a drum of this age. And then on the inside, if you look carefully, you can see that most likely there was a white finish on it that somebody removed. There you go, right there where the vent hole is. There we go. There's a lot of white there. And you can really see it on the bottom of the reinforcement rings on the top and bottom of the shell. So a couple things straight out the gate. Number one, where the throw off is, they decided to drill extra holes. Now another thing I noticed, here are the screws that are used for the throw off. So they're a normal like bolt head style throw off screw. And here are the screws for the lugs. Now one of the lugs has the same exact screws that are used for the throw off. So it's safe to say that somebody was just looking for something that had the same threading that could hold on to those lugs to make it work. So between the shell, having that white finish removed from it, having those extra holes drilled, and because one of the lugs has the same screws that are used for the throw off, on top of that, some of these tension rods. So here's an original tension rod, which you can see is nickel plated. Here's another tension rod, which is chrome. So some of the original tension rods are also missing from this. This is the original butt plate right here. So it's safe to say that this drum is a player's grade drum. I'm not gonna really focus on super restoring it and bringing it up to, let's say, bringing it back to like original showroom quality per se. You're getting the idea, it's not 100% original. However, what I can do is at least make this look really decent, and it's going to be a super high quality player's grade drum. So since the drum is already stripped, step number one is to always wipe the shell down. So I have a paper towel that has just some warm water and a little bit of Blue Dawn. This is going to help me get rid of anything that's on this shell that could be a contaminant, dirt, residue from whatever. That could be on this shell. But again, it's in really decent shape. There's a couple discoloration spots floating around, which is kind of no big deal. But wipe the drum down, you can see it's gotten a good amount of dirt removed from the shell. And then I have another paper towel that's just wet with water. That way I can wipe this shell down, remove any of the extra soap that I just put on the drum. Now we can dry the shell off and just kind of take a look around. All right, so step number one is the badge. I'm gonna use Brasso, which is what I usually use on metal, but I know that Brasso cleans up badges pretty well, gets the job done. It doesn't have that much of an abrasive on it. It's pretty mild. So I'm gonna apply just a little bit to the one microfiber towel that I use. And you can see especially how shiny it is right there. And that's what we're gonna try and get this badge to look like, just by applying a little bit of Brasso. And just by doing that, you can see that's a huge difference. And I'm not putting a whole lot of pressure. And you can see that was done in real time, so it didn't take a whole lot to do. Now, we just got to get some of that excess Brasso removed from the air grommet. So the badge looks great, just with that little bit of Brasso. You can see there's a little bit of oxidation going on. And this area over here was that brighter color, and the rest was covered in dirt and whatever else. But for something that was super quick, that's not bad at all. So we'll put that back. So I think that's the best I'm gonna get for a player's grade drum. I don't wanna, again, dive too deep into trying to get rid of everything. The badge looks good. The wrap itself looks decent. And what I just did is I sprayed some turtle wax, spray wax on it. This works great because it's a spray wax and a cleaner all in one. This will help protect the shell from elements, from me playing the drum and potentially sweating, oxidizing it, or anything like that. Plus, it's gonna help get rid of any additional dirt, debris, anything like that that I might have missed wiping it down with some Blue Dawn and water. I did a couple spots with the Goo Gone as well, so Just want to make sure all of that is off the shell before I start reassembling it. All right, let's go ahead and move on to the hoops. And like I mentioned, these hoops are nickel plated. So the amount of oxidation and dirt that gets on them is a lot different than what you would see on a chrome hoop. I'll zoom out a bit. There we go, so it focuses on the camera. Now, instead of using Brasso like I usually do, I'm gonna try some Cape Cod cloths. People say that these are fantastic when you have to work with nickel-plated metal products. These cloths come in a bag that are sealed. They already have that whatever chemical is used on it to clean it. So you can take it out and then use the cloth, and just like anything else, you're just gonna go around, wipe it down. You can already see it's making a decent difference because it's removing any of that oxidation or the contaminants from the hoop. It actually smells really good compared to Brasso. It's got kind of like a sweet smell to it. Just looking at the cloth, got a good amount of oxidation off of there. And it also comes with an additional microfiber towel that you can use to wipe down and remove any of the excess cleaner that might be left on the hoop. So here's the hoop that I just did. And below it is the top hoop. So you can see there's a drastic difference between the two. It's a drastic difference as far as how shiny it is and how clean it looks just from doing a quick wipe down. So bottom hoop's out of the way. Let's go ahead and do the same thing to the top hoop. So I'm gonna grab another Cape Cod cloth. It's the same one that I used.
Approximately 10 hours later.
Okay, so let's go ahead and clean the rest of this hardware. And here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to use a little bit of Never Dull, which is my go-to. It's super easy to use. You just pull a little bit apart. It's going to help me kind of clean the hardware, get rid of any of the debris or buildup that's on it. Afterwards, I can wipe it down with a Cape Cod cloth if it's nickel plated, just to help bring the nickel plating back to life. An original and a replacement tension rod. You can see the original tension rod head is a lot longer, narrower than, say, the replacement like this one here. Plus the finish, drastic difference. And I think the tension rods are different lengths too. The ones that are nickel plated look like they're a tad bit longer. All right, so let's move on to the lugs. Just like everything else, wipe it down with some Never Dull, try and clean it, remove any of the oxidation that may have occurred. And a little bit goes a long way. You don't have to go too crazy with it. If you want, you could take a Cape Cod cloth. So again, this is something that I would do with this hardware. Okay, so let's grab, here's a lug that I haven't done, and here's a lug that I did. So if I put them next to one another, if the camera can pick it up, you'll notice the bottom one, there's like some spotting or specks, whereas the top one doesn't have that anymore. So I'm gonna go ahead and continue that process for all of the lugs and then be right back. All right, so hardware is done. Let me move that screw out of the way. So again, what I did is I used the Eagle One Never Dull as step number one to make sure that I could remove any contaminants, dirt, whatever. Dried it off with a microfiber towel and then did the second pass with one of the Cape Cod cloths to really make sure that it would bring out the shine. Try to make these lugs look pretty presentable. So now what we want to do is put everything back together. So let's go ahead and grab a couple lugs, take a look around, see maybe which ones look the nicest. Some of these have some spider webbing where it looks like some cracks in the finish basically, which isn't that big of a deal, especially for a drum that's as old as this drum, but some of them don't look as good as the others. Good rule of thumb is always to start out turning by hand to make sure that you don't cross thread anything. Then you can use a screwdriver, tighten down the lugs as you go through. Now, one thing to keep in mind, since these lugs are offset, make sure that the lugs, if they're facing up, are on the same side. So you can see here, I've placed it so that top lug is on the right side, and you can also see the indentation. That's how it should go. Just make sure that you do that throughout the entire drum. Last thing you want to do is put a lug here and then it's not going to line up with the holes of the hoop, and you're probably going to be like, well, that doesn't make sense. So in this case, lugs go to the right when they face up. Okay, so lugs are back on. Let's go ahead and get this throw off on. So you got 2 hole spacings for this throw off, like I mentioned, right? And just test fitting bottom hoop. If I were to align this, you'll see that the bottom part of the throw off clears this bottom hoop, but I guess whoever owned the drum decided to drill additional holes and make it go a bit higher, but that seems too high to me, especially if you do that. That's a lot of play there. So I'm going to look online and let's see if I can find a reference photo and go from there. All right, so looking online, there's 2 things I've noticed. Number 1, the bottom hoop looks completely different than everything else that I'm finding. So the hoops, although they're nickel plated, are not original. No big deal though. They'll still get the job done. The second thing that I noticed is that the throw off itself should be going into the top hole spacing rather than the bottom hole spacing, because the bottom part of the throw off should not be in line with that bottom hoop based off of all of the photos that I'm finding online. So this could be a catalog photo that I found, and I'll post it so y'all can see that, or just similar drums that are currently on the used marketplace. So it's just really funny because that throw off is still crooked. If I hold this drum straight, it's still slightly crooked. So I guess that's just, you know, what happened with drums from the 1950s per se. So we'll do that. Let's go ahead and secure this butt plate as well. And pretty straightforward. So for the most part, this drum is put together. But like I said, some of these screws are different than the rest. Some of them are bolt heads or bolt tops. So I have to get a socket to make sure that those are secure, especially for the throw off, some of the lugs. And then can put new heads on, put the hoops on, new snare wires, and this drum will be ready to demo. Okay, so snare wires are on. There we are. Throw off also works. Disengage, engage and snaps in. We're good to go. So now let's get this thing onto the drum kit and let's see what it sounds like. Now, one thing I want to mention to everybody, when I was looking up the new era snare drums, it seems as if the bearing edge has more of a round over than other vintage wooden drums of this time. As some of you may already know, it's pretty standard for modern drums to have a double 45, meaning there's a 45-degree inside cut and a 45-degree outside cut that make a point for the bearing edges. And they're supposed to make the drums be really punchy and have a lot of attack to them. However, older drums had a bit of a round over to them. So there could have been a 45-degree inside cut with a round over. It could have been a full round over. It really was dependent on the brand that was making the drum. But with this drum being a mahogany shell and having more of a round over edge, it's not going to be as direct and punchy. It's going to have more warmth to it. And I don't know why in particular with this drum, being that it's older and it is a mahogany shell, I didn't have as broad of a tuning range with it as I have with other drums. Case in point, that 15-inch field snare drum that I showcased in an earlier Snare Saturday video with a ridiculous tuning range. Either way, I still think that this drum does have a decent tuning range and you can use it for whatever style you are looking to play, even though this drum was designed to be a jazz drum. But either way, I would love to get your feedback and what you thought of this drum, so make sure that you leave it in the comment section below letting me know. Also, if you have any other additional questions on the drum, maybe the gear that I am playing, or some of the products that I use to detail or restore a snare drum, feel free to leave that in the comment section as well, and I will try my best to answer them. If you enjoyed this video and you want to see some earlier videos from the Snare Saturday series, I put a link to the playlist in the description below, and I'll also have the link pop up right here to make it a bit easier for you. Finally, if you enjoyed this video, please make sure that you give it a thumbs up. That way it makes it a little bit easier for others to find it. And a final reminder for the Ludwig 6.5x14 chrome over brass snare drum giveaway at shop.nickcostamusic.com. Every dollar that you spend will get you 5 entries into winning this snare drum. And that is it. Thank you so much for checking out this video on the Leedy and Ludwig 4.5x14 new era snare drum. And until next time, see you later.